You woke up. You've waited through breakfast. You've waited through church. You've waited through Easter Sunday lunch. And finally it's time to eat the Easter egg that you're really excited about. And you grab your Easter egg and you open the box and you discover that it's empty. And you think, my box is empty. And you say to everybody else in your family, they've taken the egg out of the box and I don't know where they put it. They've taken the egg out of the box and I don't know where they put it. And you run around the house and you try to find your mum and dad or your brother and sister to come and help you. And maybe you even have a little bit of a cry. Now, if you were listening carefully to the Bible story, you might have noticed that all of those things happened in the true story of Easter Sunday. And this morning we're going to think about what that means. Just like if you discovered your empty Easter egg box, you'd want to know what happened. You'd investigate it. Well, that is what we're going to do this morning. We're going to investigate the true story of Easter Sunday. And we're going to think, what does it mean for me today? We're going to learn two lessons. Here's the first one. The verdict of history. Jesus' tomb was empty. The verdict of history. Jesus' tomb was empty. Now, the other day, I had to run back to the school gate because one of our children had forgotten something. It wasn't very important, but it was kind of important. So I ran to make sure I got there before the gate shut. And another parent saw me and said, "Oh, we'll take that for you." Because they could tell that it was kind of important. Because that's what happens when we run for important things. And if things aren't very important to us, we just walk. I wonder if you can remember the last time you ran for something important. Well, that is what happened on that very first Easter Sunday morning. Mary, Peter and John ran. They ran because Jesus mattered to them. Just like you might run around your house later this afternoon to find your missing Easter egg. Mary runs to find her friends. And as soon as they hear what she's got to say, they run too. You notice that in the Bible reading. Mary came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They've taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they put him." So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. And here are Peter and John. They're trembling a little bit because they've run and they're out of breath and they've just got to the tomb. What has happened? Has someone stolen Jesus' body? Has someone buried it somewhere else? They've got to investigate. They've got to find out what has happened. Now, boys and girls, I wonder if you've ever noticed that our church is full of tombs. Why don't you stand up and see if you can point to a tomb? I'll give you a clue. They're all on the floor. See if you stand up, boys and girls, where you are. Stand on your pew. See if you can point to a tomb. They're everywhere, all around our church. Tombs. And our Bible story is full of one tomb. I wonder if you noticed it. We could go around the church, couldn't we, counting all the tombs. But what we're going to do is, I want you to count the number of times the word tomb appears in our Bible story. I'll give you the first one. 1. Can you count with me? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 times in 11 verses, John writes the tomb. Because he wants us to know this is a story about the tomb. What would you find if you came to church with a pickaxe and a shovel and you started digging up one of these tombs? What would you find? Luke? Bones. You'd find a dead body. But what did Peter and John find when they looked inside Jesus' tomb? Let's find out. They didn't find out what they were expecting. I want you to imagine again that you've got your box and you look inside your box and all you find is some neatly folded silver foil, all by itself. I don't think you're going to think someone has stolen my Easter egg, because someone who steals Easter eggs doesn't unwrap Easter eggs and leave the foil behind neatly. They just take the Easter egg and run away. Well, it was like that with Jesus. Instead of silver foil, they found some strips of linen. The sorts of things that the people had wrapped Jesus' body in. They weren't just dumped in a pile. They were neatly folded up where Jesus' body had been. Listen to what it says. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but he didn't go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. So that's what they see. They don't see silver foil. They see the cloths, perhaps a little bit like that, neatly lying where Jesus' body had been. Even the cloth that had gone around Jesus' head was neatly folded up by itself. So what is going on? Someone who steals a body doesn't unwrap a body and leave all the cloths neatly behind. They just take the body and run, just like your Easter egg thief. What's going on? The first lesson, the verdict of history. Jesus' tomb was empty. His body wasn't there. What is going on? Well, John is just beginning to figure it out. Finally, the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. He saw and believed. But this verse is a real puzzle. I've been puzzling about this verse this week. He saw the strips of linen and he believed. What did he believe? Did he believe that someone had stolen the body? I don't think so, because of the linen. Did he believe that Jesus had been raised from the dead? I don't think so, because of look what it says next. It says, they still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to where they were staying. You see, Peter and John, they still don't understand God's big plan to raise Jesus from the dead. And all they do next is go home. It's not the sort of thing you'd expect someone to do who's just found out that their best friend has been raised from the dead. So what do they believe? Well, I think he begins to believe this. He looks and he thinks, God's fingerprints are all over this thing. I don't get it yet, but God is doing something here. He saw and he believed that God was doing something. The verdict of history. Jesus' tomb was empty. Now, I don't know if you like history at school, but here's a history quiz. The Great Fire of London, Jesus' empty tomb, me becoming Archbishop of Canterbury, and Henry VIII's 6 wives. 3 of those things happened in history. One of those things didn't, even if I would have really liked it to have happened. I didn't become the Archbishop of Canterbury. You see, the empty tomb is like the Great Fire of London, or Jesus' empty, or Henry VIII's 6 wives. It really happened. It's not like me becoming Archbishop of Canterbury, something we would have quite liked to have happened, but never did. It really did happen. Here's something for the adults. Norman Anderson, who went to University of Cambridge, he was a professor at Princeton and a professor at Harvard and dean of the Faculty of Laws at the University of London, he said this: the empty tomb forms a veritable rock on which all rationalistic theories of the resurrection dash themselves in vain. That's something for the grown-ups. In other words, the verdict of history. Jesus' tomb was empty. But so what? Why does it matter? Well, let's look at our second lesson this morning. The voice in our hearts. Jesus lives as Lord forever. The voice in our hearts. Jesus lives as Lord forever. Peter and John have gone home. Mary's still there by the tomb. She's standing outside crying. And she looks inside and she doesn't see strips of linen. She sees 2 angels. And the angels say to her, "Woman, why are you crying?" And she says, they've taken my Lord away and I don't know where they put him. She turns around and she sees Jesus, but she doesn't realise it's Jesus. She thinks he's the gardener. And she says, sir, if you take him away, please tell me and I'll go and get him. I love what Mary says. She says, I will get him. You see, Mary loves Jesus. She's seen him die. His body is in a mess. And she doesn't know where his body is. Someone's taken him, she thinks, and that person might be really dangerous. But she doesn't care. She says, I will get him. But here's the thing. Mary doesn't need to get Jesus. Because Jesus has come back from the dead. He's alive again and he's come to get her. Jesus turned to her and said, Mary. She turned towards him and cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. The other day I bumped into a friend and he had his little dog Cherry with him. And Cherry wasn't interested in me at all. And then someone else turned up who knows Cherry, who sometimes walks Cherry, and Cherry started wagging her tail and jumping up and down at this other person because she knew this other person, she recognised her voice. It's a little bit like that with Mary and Jesus. She looks at him, but she doesn't recognise him. And as soon as he says her name, Mary, she's like, I know who you are. You're my friend, Jesus. It's like Jesus had said earlier in John's Gospel. He said, the watchman opens the gate for the good shepherd, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. You see, the Bible says that we are sheep, and Jesus is the good shepherd, and he knows each one of us. He knows what our name is, and he's come back from the dead to get us. We don't need to get him. He's come to get us. All we need to do is listen to his voice. The voice in our hearts. Jesus lives as Lord forever. Now, of course, we don't hear Jesus with our ears like Mary did in that garden. We hear him when he speaks in this book in the Bible. He speaks to our hearts, not to our ears. And if we know him, if we recognise his voice, we'll hear his voice in here. You see, if your Easter egg disappeared from your Easter egg box, what would you do? You won't keep on looking inside the box, trying to find it, thinking, oh, it might be in there somewhere. Maybe it's in that corner. No, it's not there. Christians don't need to go and look in a tomb to find Jesus. If your egg wasn't in the box, you might run around the house. Maybe it's in the cupboard. Maybe it's in the fridge. Christians don't need to run around the world looking for Jesus because he's not here. Not like he was for Mary in that garden. Listen to what he said next. He said, don't hold on to me, for I've not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. In other words, Mary, I'm not going to stay around for much longer. I'm going up to heaven to be with God, my Father. And he can be your Father too. You can be one of God's children because I've died and risen again for you. So don't go looking for me in a garden because he's in heaven now. So what does Mary do? Jesus says, go and tell my brothers all about this. And that's what she does. Mary went to the disciples with the news, I've seen the Lord. And she told them that he had said these things to her. Can you remember what Mary has said in the story? She said to Peter and John, they've taken the Lord away. I don't know where they put him. What did she say to the angels? She says, they've taken the Lord away. I don't know where he is. What did she say to Jesus when she thought he was the gardener? She said, Sir, or Lord, it's the same word. If you take him away, tell me and I'll go and get him. She wants to know where her Lord is. But then she says at the end, I have seen the Lord. She's heard her voice in his heart, and she knows that he's the Lord who lives forever. And so she is not crying anymore. She must have been, at that moment in time, the most excited and happy person in the whole world. Well, what about you and me this Easter Sunday? Maybe this afternoon in this nice sunshine, you're going to go and have an Easter egg hunt in your garden. Maybe someone's going to play a trick on you and take an Easter egg out of your favourite Easter egg box, and you're going to have to go and look for it. When you find it, you'll be so happy. See, the good news of Easter is like a gazillion times better than finding a lost Easter egg. The verdict of history, Jesus' tomb was empty. It's not there anymore. The voice in our hearts, Jesus lives as Lord forever. Because he lives as Lord forever, you and I can be children of God forever. All we need to do is listen to him. And he speaks to our hearts. And then we can tell others about him, just like Mary did. Amen. I'm going to invite Michelle, who's going to come and lead us in our prayers.